Necromancy sponsored this video because they've got a Kickstarter, Stibble's Codex of Companions, a book filled with new pets, familiars, monsters, and more, written by Runesmith. Look, if you've ever wanted little buddies in D&D with a whole friendship mechanic that has very professional looking art and lots of stretch goals, go back Stibble's Codex of Companions. Boys support boys.
But of course, the most important thing about friends is that they have your back and you have theirs. Stibble's Codex of Companions. A world of friends just waiting to be discovered. We hope to see you soon.
Okay, video time. So you're gonna DM a beholder, huh? You're gonna throw an aberrational horror of tentacle eyes that shoot lasers at your heroes because you're tired of making attack rolls and want a big old monster that can sit there, drink tea, read the latest news on the Far Realm, all while your party dodges all of its beams. Here's how to DM a beholder. You might be asking yourself, what's a beholder? To put it simply, a multi-eyed floating alien with a disdain for everything that isn't itself. Logan's actually got a great video on the lore of beholders, but with this video and possible series, we're going to talk about how dungeon masters can use them as encounters, villains, or if you're just confused by the stat block. But always remember, we're not trying to kill our players, we're trying to challenge them. Get that DM versus player mentality out of here because we want these guys to win or lose based on their own merits. Head full of fantasies of a complete party slaughter, TPKs are easy, young man, a fun encounter is harder. First of all, let's get to know a beholder. Have you ever had an anxious dream? Worried all night about something that you barely slept? You were too paranoid to the point where the events you didn't want to happen were seeming like they were happening? Anxiety and paranoia are the epitome of beholders. They are so terrified that they aren't the greatest, most powerful beings in the world that they spend more of their time worrying and protecting themselves from death that they miss the point of their entire beliefs. Beholders are prepared and very intelligent. They may only have a 17, but all of their brain power is devoted to self-preservation. They're still aberrations. Aliens, basically. They are clever and almost animalistic in this way. Beholders could beat you in a game of chess because they know all of the different moves that can happen, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't be outsmarted. Beholders still gather minions. They are nevertheless tyrants and always rule over smaller beings. Their pride and hubris is nothing if there's no one to behold it. They also gather treasures, not a hoard like a dragon, but more trinkets that interest them. Beholders are smart enough to use currency if necessary. Xanathar runs an entire mafia underneath Waterdeep. Ultimately, a beholder wants power and safety, to be worshipped and for no one to ever threaten their power. Sounds comfy. So if you're going to set up a beholder as a villain for your game, perhaps place them as the secret puppet master that rules behind the scenes, or a lord-like tyrant that sends his minions to rule over the rest of the world. You could even have the beholder use brain-controlled adventurers as its minions. The crystal caverns at the foot of the White Trail Mountains are said to have the most valuable and beautiful of gems that mortals have ever laid their eyes on. Yet all those who venture into the cave never return. Some say the gems are cursed, and others say that the gems are so valuable that adventurers and treasure seekers kill one another in the caves just to make off with the money. However, do not underestimate this dastardly place. Many have seen familiar lost faces guard it, now as its servant forever. Boom, beholder. That being said, beholders are a pretty high CR. Now, CR is mostly bullshit, but it's a good indicator on whether or not a level 5 party could reasonably fight a beholder. A beholder could one-shot any of these adventurers if they got lucky with their disintegration or death ray. So, how do we make this interesting instead of just a kill fest? Well, they can have minions, but I find minions to be, cumbersome to run in D&D. I think 3 to 5 weaker than the boss monster creatures is far easier and more interesting to run. Good examples for beholders could be like as mentioned before, charmed adventurers. Volo's Guide even has stats for adventurers in the NPC section. The beholder pitting adventurers against themselves can make for a certainly interesting fight. If that isn't your cup of tea, any other native race to where the beholder build up its lair works well. Lizard folk, Yonti, Ettercaps, you name it. Beholders will dominate anyone they can. The problem is that beholders don't work well together. Don't pair beholders with other beholders. Now, as your party ventures to the beholder, remember the whole segment on paranoia? Yeah, well, the beholders are gonna have traps in that place. traps are never meant to kill your players, because let's be honest, who the fuck wants their character to die to a trap? I don't think even DMs want their players to die to their traps. Traps are really just setbacks that you can disguise as near-death experiences. Plus, we don't want to kill these guys. We just want to weaken them or use up some of their spell slots before they get to this guy. Some good traps for beholders could simply just be stepped on, pressure plates, tripwires, etc. However, notice how this guy doesn't have any hands? He's probably not very good at making tripwire traps, leading to the idea of a beholder charming someone into making their traps. Which means, up until this point, your party's going to go to a jungle, fight some lizard folk shamans, go into their temple, dodge the rolling boulder and spiked pits with lizard folk poison, to then find a beholder behind all of it. Not a grand crocodile god, a basketball with eyes. These dudes are subversive. Now, beholders always have a contingency plan. That being said, unless you want your beholder to be a reoccurring villain, it's gonna be really lame if there's just a secret back door that the beholder escapes through. Nyaha! My lore makes me cooler than you. However, the beholder can still have a contingency for the contingency, meaning his lair room is built for combat anyways. Enter the anti-magic prism, or disco ball. Beholder flies up and uses the anti-magic cone on a prism, effectively making everything except for himself, mostly just for his flying, in his lair non-magical. This beholder can't use his eye beams on the party, but can instead have a couple of minions come out and fight them with regular-ass melee attacks while the party can try to break the prism. Now we enter final stage of the combat. We've got some interesting things to fight this beholder, and now it's a constant battle of wits. Who can outsmart who? And now it's just raw fighting. So, how do we run the beholder in combat? Simple. Like this. A beholder is a really easy monster to run because you don't have to roll anything, unless you're going to use its bite, or it's going to make a saving throw against one of the player's spells. On its turn, it uses 3 random beams, roll a d10 and ignore duplicates, and fires them appropriately. All of these beams are saving throws for the players. Beholders also have 3 legendary actions, each legendary action being firing a random beam. So on its turn, it's going to fire 3 beams, and in between everyone's turns, it's going to fire 3 more beams. Luckily for the party, you ignore duplicates, meaning on its turn, it's only going to have a chance of doing 55 damage once, but it can still get it on legendary actions. To combat these eye stalks, I always let players cut off an eye stalk if they do at least 20 damage in slashing. It can be collective or over the course of the combat. All you do is remove that option from the beholder's beams and can create a bit more of a dynamic, free-flowing combat system where they're battling this beholder instead of just punching it directly into its basketball face. Now, you've also got the anti-magic cone coming from its big eyeball. The way I kind of rule it is kind of like the optional facing rules in the DMG. Anti-magic zone is kind of good and kind of bad, because the area works against the beholder's own eye rays, meaning that if you're in the anti-magic cone, you're safe from the rays, but you can't use your magic. This can be a tactic for your players to even evade the beholder's rays, which can be super creative and smart on their part if the fighter decides to dive into it at the end of his turn so that he can get targeted by the eye rays over the course of the legendary actions. And finally, there's lair actions. Lair actions go on initiative count 20. These are helpful in giving more action economy to the beholder without adding a million more creatures to the initiative. But I say use them sparingly. You don't want to overwhelm your players with a bajillion eye beams. At this point, it's in the hands of the players. They have a lot of opportunities to kill this beholder, but it's not going to go down easy. The beholder doesn't have a whole lot of hit points, so playing him defensively is the way to go. The players should be rewarded for outsmarting the beholder and eventually getting the chance to get some big hits on it. So yeah, that's how I run beholders. There's a lot of other ways to do it, but always make sure to just have fun with the way that you play Dodge the Dragons. Okay, that's the end of the video.